Hey, my name is George McCain, and I'm from Columbia, South Carolina, and I'm going to be speaking on the importance of the Methodist Church in American history. And I'm going to make three quick points. The first point is, and it's a question, what is a Methodist? Well, James Neal wrote in his book, Historic United Methodist Churches and Places in South Carolina, that a Methodist, and he's quoting John Wesley, a Methodist is one who lives according to the method laid down in the Bible, method being the key word. The term Methodist, according to James Neal, was a term given to John and Charles Wesley and a group of their friends who met regularly for Bible study back in 1729 till 1735. And they focused on Bible study and a methodical approach to Scripture. And their friends started calling them Methodist because of their method and their methodical approach to how they studied. So that is where the term Methodist come from, which is a good thing because we have a religious denomination that is methodical about how it studies the Scriptures. So that is important in American history. It's not important that we have religion so much. It's important that we have a religion that is methodical about the Scriptures. How did the Scriptures get spread throughout the United States? Well, back during that era, during the 1700s, the Methodist Church provided circuit preachers. And as people moved west, they didn't have a church. They didn't have a lot of things. They didn't have churches. They didn't have schools. They didn't have doctors. They were like the advance party for civilization. They were the first ones to go out west, and they left a lot of the necessities behind. Well, the Methodist Church would send out circuit preachers, and these were preachers on horseback, and they would ride hundreds and sometimes thousands of miles, stopping off at different churches. A circuit preacher may have 3, 4, 5 churches in his circuit, and he would just go from one church to the next until he completed his circuit. Then he would start all over again. And when he would come into an area, of course, the people would be expecting their circuit preacher once they knew he was coming, but they didn't know exactly when he was coming. They just knew that sooner or later the preacher's going to be here. So any needs that they would have for a minister, they'd have to wait until the preacher got there. So if you wanted to be married, as an example, then you waited on the circuit preacher. But the circuit preacher brought the gospel. He preached the gospel. He preached that all people need to be saved. This is what the Methodists preached. All people need to be saved. All people can be saved. All people can know that they are saved. And all people can know that they are saved to the utmost. That gets back to that methodical approach to Scripture that John and Charles Wesley had, which is very important. It's very important for people to understand what salvation is. And the Methodist Church was very clear in how it presented it. And they presented it through these circuit preachers, which was a great thing because they brought news with them. They were like the media coming into the little villages and towns because they could tell people what was going on throughout the rest of the world. And one of the most well-known circuit preachers was a man named Francis Asbury. And author Jeremy Steele wrote about him in the Resource United Methodist Church magazine. He wrote an article called 10 Interesting Facts About Francis Asbury. And a couple of things that he mentioned was that even though Francis Asbury rode over 130,000 miles on horseback, going from church to church to church on his circuit preaching, he preached over 10,000 sermons, and he ordained over 2,000 new preachers. He didn't have a lot of skill. He was not a good preacher. They say that he was really hard to follow. He wasn't really that interesting. But he was a dynamic pastor, and he did a lot of good things for a lot of people. And he did a lot of good things for the Methodist Church as a whole, just by simply ordaining 2,000 people. He was also a forerunner in the Sunday school movement too. Now, here was a man that had very little education, but he was a forerunner with the Sunday school movement. And back then, Sunday schools weren't just to teach Sunday morning Bible study class. Back then, Sunday schools were to teach the children how to read and write, because when they moved out west, when they crossed over the Appalachian Mountains, they left a lot of things behind, including school teachers. So the circuit preachers would not necessarily teach themselves, but they would provide the teachers. They would get the people in the area to start teaching the children how to read and write. So the three important areas that the Methodist Church provided in American history are: one, the sound doctrine, the methodical approach to Scripture, and then the evangelism through the circuit preachers who brought the gospel. They brought Sunday school. They brought the means to teach children how to read and write. They did a lot of good things for the people. And I see I've hit 6 minutes, so thank you.